what is it the Saudis are trying to get out of this? And I think definitely a commonality here. So sports are a kind of stylized space where you see achievement. It's easy to measure. You count goals. You see how people train. You can really, it brings to the surface human ability and sort of the high level excellence, right? So it's virtue, and like people really put a lot of work to get to the point where they can play at these elite levels, and we admire them for that, right? So there's real virtue involved in being a top athlete, in the sense of at least putting in the work to perform physically, and just the mental game of it. And sports as well are understood to be fair. Like people are upset when the goalie lets something in, and the referee says, "Oh, we're not going to let that in," and so people upset the referee because there's understood to be clear rules, right? So we don't want a game that's unjust. Nobody's going to tolerate that. So there's excellence in it, there's justice in it, and there's prestige. Like to be the world's best soccer player or the world's best whatever player, golf, tennis, you pick the sport, that means something. How many people can ever reach that height? And I think that's part of what the Saudis recognize. Like if they get to associate themselves with some of the best, highest profile people who've actually achieved something, who've done something important in their life, that are admired by millions and maybe billions of people around the world. And if you're sitting in the palace, if you're MBS and you sit there and you know how scummy you are, you know what an evil organization your government is, and it's basically thugs running around in luxury cars dominating a country, you know how bad you are at some level. And how much better would it be for you if you got to associate your country with elite athletes, and have some of their virtue rub off on you, and just have a shield for people to pay attention to the athletes and not pay attention to what's happening in the dungeons where people are tortured and murdered and dismembered. So there's an important way in which sports is particularly attractive as a means of whitewashing Saudi Arabia. And I think they want that. I think it's a whole campaign. And so I flip that over. So what is it about the Saudis that makes them want a deal with the United States? And the important thing about that deal is the inversion of it. So the Saudis are the ones setting the terms of this deal. So I said the Saudis promised normalization with Israel. It's absurd to me, and it should be absurd to everyone else, that the Saudis are the ones deciding if to recognize Israel or not. Israel has a lot of faults, and I've written a book that includes a lot of criticisms of Israel, but it's basically a good, free society, the kind of place where you would rather be a resident than in Saudi Arabia, for the reasons that it protects freedom to a degree much greater than anything else in the region. And that you have a dictatorship sitting around saying, no, we're not going to recognize you. You're evil. We're good. And we're going to decide if we're going to treat you as a normal country. That's basically what the Saudis are doing. That is a complete inversion. That's like that's like having a gang running a neighborhood and deciding if to recognize the police. It's ridiculous. Like that's completely absurd. And now notice that it's a three-part agreement. It's not just we'll recognize Israel, which would be okay. They can have an agreement, and anyway, they're starting to move in that direction because they know they need to. But it's involving the U.S. that makes this so similar to the deals that they're doing with these sports figures. And I think that's because what's similar here is that the US as a government, with all of its faults, and we spend a lot of time on this podcast and in our journal commenting about the faults in the US system. And Ayn Rand had a lot of criticisms that were really harsh about the US system. Nevertheless, it is the best, freest country left on the planet. And if you can have a mutual defense agreement with the United States, if you can cozy up to the United States and position yourself as a major non-NATO ally, whatever the category is that they're seeking, it's a major, major relationship. That has a similar effect. That means that the United States is lending its moral virtue, its prestige, its deserved stature as a free society, and helping the Saudis whitewash their own by association. So it's giving them moral cover. It's sort of helping to launder the crimes and wash away, or at least cover up, the blood that the Saudis have on their hands. So this is this real important commonality here, and the Saudis know it, and that's why they're pursuing it. I think you can piece the dots together and see that this is it isn't just accidental that they're investing hugely in sports, and it's not accidental that they want an even closer relationship to the US, which it's already too close in my view. The relationship with Saudis for a long time has been perverse. But they're asking for Americans just to agree to lay down their lives to defend this dictatorship. Like, you cannot, I mean, it's very, very high stakes when you get to that level of relationship. So to me, this is a desperate attempt by the Saudis to position themselves as much better than they are, to position themselves as civilized, which they're not, and to make it seem like, yeah, this is the place where Ronaldo plays. How could you have any questions about our standing? How could you even question that we don't treat women as human beings?